Hello, everybody. Hello, everybody. Hi, Edie, and welcome to the Traumaplicity Talk Show. My name is Dr. Amanda Helman, author, coach, consultant, speaker, and I am here with you on this Wednesday. We have this weekly at Wednesday, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And today I'm delighted to have my friend, Edith Hotan, on with me today. And she is incredible. She goes all over the place and is passionate to see people set free. She's an author and has children's books, just like I have one, but she has one, and we've gone to different book fairs, and has a lot of background in supervision, leadership, and I'm just so glad to have you on here, Edie, and you can certainly add to what I shared about you so far.
Thanks. Let's see. Well, I would have hardly recognized myself by hearing that intro. So thank you for being so wonderfully complimentary. I do actually have one thing to add, and that is that I actually have one children's book series. And then on top of that, the Lord started recently giving me a download on another kind of more advanced level of children's book. And so I just started writing another book like 10 days ago and pretty far into it already, which is totally a surprise. And it's just a lot of fun to be writing with the Lord. So that's it for that.
I love it. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that. And that's amazing. But I know the Sheldon, right? The Sheldon the Pelicans series, but now you have a new one coming. So audience, that's very exciting. We have another author and speaker with me today. Great. So Edie, I am glad that you're on here. So the Traumaplicity show is really kind of fun, play on words. So trauma, right? We have complex trauma, and usually hear complex and people want to shut down, right? Because complex makes it seem very hard, which I'm not saying that it isn't, right? There's processes, especially when you're healing and going through things, but it's taking trauma and simplifying steps, right? Simplifying the process. So our brain says, ooh, simplicity and trauma. I can do that, right? I can take simple steps in my journey and not look at the whole picture, but one step at a time. So that's why I'm having different people on every week to share their story and journey with those simple steps they take step by step, right? One thing at a time to help move forward and have your healing. So Edie, I'm glad to have you on. I know you've had journeys, right? Just like we do in life. And so I'm wondering what trauma, like, again, one thing that you've gone over, maybe it was complex trauma or something that took some time to process. And if you could share with the audience what that was and what that looked like for you.
Sure. I just give you a kind of nutshell edition of it. My mother passed away in 2004. And shortly after that, within a couple months after that, I met a man after having prayed quite specifically for what it was I was hoping for, and got married way too soon. And apparently I, wrote off some what I would call bad behavior as, oh, well, he was just stressed. Well, first of all, I'm just going to tell you right here and now, stress can reveal someone's true character. So take note. Don't just excuse things. Anyway, got married, and there was this continuous, he just kept saying, that he just was uncomfortable with different things and different friendships that I had in the past. And so one by one, I cut those friendships off. And we had agreed that what we wanted to do is kind of redirect our lives and really start living more Christian dedicated lives. Yet it just never quite happened. And what did end up happening was that I got to a point and I just realized that I'm not somebody who's willing to just talk about things to that, just keep on talking and not ever do anything. And so I started making some changes, and I got more involved in the church that I was attending, as well as actually doing some ride-alongs with the police department. And it was in the context of that I was going through some training, learning how to recognize abuse victims. And all of a sudden everything clicked. And I was like, oh my gosh, I am in an abusive relationship. And the person who's supposed to love me more than anyone else on the planet has done things to me that fall under these categories of abuse. And this is not copacetic. It's not going to continue. That is not who I am. I am not codependent, and I'm making some changes. And so I told him that I didn't think that things were healthy the way they were going, and that I thought we needed to take a separation. And he ended up not believing that I just intended for a separation. And so he filed for divorce, accusing me of being in an adulterous relationship. And that is not a place that anybody who has freshly rededicated their life to Christ wants to find themselves. And so that was pretty traumatic for me. And I ended up, it took 2 years to go through the whole process. And there was a lot of accusation, and I learned a lot of really great lessons. And one of the things that I learned is that not every single accusation is meant to create a dialogue where you can actually win. And so the enemy will always accuse us of things, and it's really just meant to keep us unsettled and unable to move forward as we're trying to follow the Lord. And so that was kind of one of the really big takeaways that I got from that. And I think that kind of, and so I got to share this because it was kind of my one funny thing that I was able to do was, when he would say, well, who is he? What's his name? I did say that his name is Jesus, and he says he misses you. Looking back on it, that was a little bit juvenile, but it was fun to say. So
oh, that's funny. Well, no, I appreciate that. And so your story, right? And I think what's important is maybe people in the audience, right? You're looking up different things for abuse victims when you are in your marriage, and those red flags that you said that we sometimes might say, well, it's this or that, right? They're still red flags. And what was important is that you realize that in the middle of your search, right? You're like, oh my goodness, this is part of my journey, right? And that would be, again, anything with abusive in marriage, right? Or relationships is not healthy, but sometimes, again, depending what we've seen, what we've grown up with, or different factors and where we're at, right? Definitely impacts us. So Edie, I appreciate you sharing about that, relationship. And even obviously when he said, who else, right? Trying to accuse you of other people. And you're like, well, Jesus, Jesus, my love. But so when you were going through that, and obviously that is a lot, and thanks for being vulnerable, what were some simple steps after you perhaps knew about the abuse that you started to take to help you in your journey with this abusive relationship?
Well, one of the things that I ended up doing was I knew that I couldn't just sit around and look at the wreckage of my life. So I got extremely involved in doing the ride-alongs with the police department and going into the inner city and ministering to people and interacting with other people. And I found that one of the things that really helps with is I don't care who you are, and I don't really care what you're going through. Forgive me. There's always someone who has it way worse than you do. And so if we can put things into perspective, that helps us get out of our own head, which generally speaking in a crisis or traumatic situation is not a good place to just hang out. They talk about the battlefield of the mind, and boy, they are right on point with that. Another thing that I started doing was I started going swimming every day. And in order to swim the distance that I wanted to swim, I didn't want to just be saying the number of laps that I was on over and over and over in my mind. And so I created a way where I could actually worship as I swam. And so for the first lap, it was with one word, praises to the Lord. The second lap was, I bring so-and-so to you. The third lap was, thank you for setting so-and-so free. The fourth lap was, I thank you for this. And the fifth lap was just go crazy and pray whatever it was that God put on my heart. And I just found that really kind of helped me dump a lot of what could have become baggage that would have slowed me down for the rest of time. And in doing that, it reestablished my focus on Jesus. Mm-hmm. And that's really what we're called to do. And after a while, I got to a point where I realized in my heart that if my now ex-husband had that much opposition preventing him from stepping into who it is that he wanted to become by what he would say, then he must have an amazing destiny. And as far as I know, the entire body of Christ isn't going to move forward until everyone is in their positions. And so it was up to me to kind of release forgiveness, because the way the scripture reads is it says that which you loose on earth is loosed in heaven. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to release forgiveness to him on earth, that he would definitely be forgiven in heaven, and he would be free to step into his divine assignment from the Lord, should he get to a point where he could do that. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to be one more thing on his list of things that was preventing him from forgiving himself, you know? Mm-hmm. So I spent a lot of time praying for mercy for him and just praying for him to open his heart, you know? And it doesn't matter what the result of those prayers was, because that's not my issue. You know, my job is to do what the Lord asks me to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good. So you first talked about, again, right, every trauma matters, whether it be one event or complex, which does compound. And even in that, you know, perhaps like you found ways to look at other people that were also in pain, to also, you know, realize and be able to help in that, right? Instead of being in words so much, right? You're also having the balance of being able to go through that pain, but also realizing that other people are in pain and putting that to good use. And then you also talked about, again, right, like looking at your journey with forgiveness, like how are you thinking about him? And there's a lot of emotions with that, right? So forgiveness is a process for sure, right? It starts with our heart saying we're willing, and then there is a process, you know, that we go through in that. So if those of you out there, if you're in the midst of it and you're not there, you're in a journey, right, with it. So like Edie was talking about how she learned how to go to that place of willing to forgiveness, and then releasing those emotions towards you know, towards this man, and like seeing, okay, I don't want to have one extra thing. So that's a big journey too, right? So the forgiveness factor and going on that and learning, okay, what can I do? And some of you out there may be believers, some of you may not be, right? So your understanding of forgiveness may be different. But definitely, like what Edie was saying, is looking at the weights that you might be carrying, right, that you want to release from the other person. And a lot of times, if we keep all those things inside, what we're doing is we're holding on all these weights that need to be lifted off, right, of ourselves, and we don't know how to impact the other person. But right, like whatever the other person does, that's up to them, right? But we can choose to go through and heal from our part, you know, or like heal from what we're carrying, so that you can be free. So I appreciate those steps, Edie, that you shared, and just wanted to kind of recap what I heard and share it with the audience as well.
And one thing that I'd like to add to that is that when we choose to forgive, number one, it's a choice, just like love is. Mm-hmm. But when we choose to forgive someone, we are not saying that what they did was all right. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that. What we're saying is that we are no longer choosing to be tied to that. Mm-hmm. And we're not choosing to be a victim anymore, mm-hmm. because we are overcomers. And, you know, while we hold on to unforgiveness, we are basically allowing ourselves to be held captive to an experience that went on a really long time ago. And quite frankly, why rent space in your head to someone who did something to you many, many years ago, and they have just gone on with their life and they have no idea that it's still messing with yours, you know? So I know it's simple. It's just not easy. And the thing to remember is, maybe one way to look at it is to say that, when Jesus was on the cross, he said, they know not what they do. Well, they may have known what they were doing to you, but they definitely didn't know the full effect that it would have on you. And so when we say they don't know what they're doing, there is truth in that. They may have been aware that they were hurting you, but they didn't know the fullness of the extent. And it's okay to forgive them, because you're not saying what they did was all right. You're just saying you don't choose to be tied to it any longer.
Yeah, well, that's good. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So those of you out there, you don't want to be tied to it. And I appreciate you adding to what you shared with the forgiveness, Edie. And so when we're looking at this, I don't know if there's any other steps. Like sometimes people, right, might do like journaling or art. Like, do you have any other things that might be simple when women are going through this, or people that you had for support, or any other simple, practical things a brain might say, okay, I can do that one little step?
Well, I mean, so once again, for me, being a sold out believer in Jesus, the best thing I could do is take my ex-husband to him. So I could picture Jesus standing there, picture my ex-husband, take him by the hand, walk him over to Jesus, put his hand in Jesus's hand and say, this one's for you. And then turn and walk away, because that's, I mean, if somebody actually ends up getting a hold of Jesus, bit by bit by bit, they will be changed. And ideally, maybe they'll then become the person who you wished they were in the beginning. Who knows? But, without any question in my heart, I know that person's going to be better off by meeting Jesus.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So for those of you out there, if you're believers, right, and you know about Jesus, that is amazing. And certainly that is, a lot of my story too, Edie. But if there are other people out there, maybe they're not so sure about Jesus, right? They don't really know him. What are some other practical steps that you can share with people that may be on a journey, not even really knowing him, that might be helpful for them facing trauma?
Well, you could probably picture, like two huge suitcases or just one huge suitcase. And imagine that the person is now in that suitcase. Do you want to carry them around the rest of your life? Or do you want to put that down somewhere?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I don't want to lug people around with me. No.
Yeah. So, that would be one way to do it. And then, there's other ways of thinking of it too. Like, would you rather have a bowl that's full or half full or empty? I'd rather have one that's empty, because if it's empty, I'm free to grab whatever is coming my way with the empty bowl.
I like it. Yes.
Otherwise there might be some amazing treasure that passes me by.
This is true. Yeah. So I love it. I love it. So, right, out of those of you in the audience, maybe, right, like kind of on your journey, either you have Jesus in front of you or another person that you give, this stuff away to, or perhaps you have a suitcase, like Edie said, and you don't want to be carrying around anyone. I don't even care if it's like, they're like a teenager person that you're mad at or someone older. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot. It's not a lot just having a regular luggage, right? Of like that you carry. So I love that analogy, Edie. And again, for those of you on here, right, that you can hear about our faith, right, this change us, but also if you're on a journey and not sure, there's other tips too that can be like that to help you release that. So Edie, I appreciate a lot of this. Now, for those who are women and men that are on this journey, maybe they're in a relationship that's perhaps abusive, right? Or maybe they're in one and they just need some type of wisdom as to what to do next, right? Maybe it isn't so safe. Maybe they're in one that is nothing safe about abuse, right? But when they're in that, what's some wisdom you would want to give to encourage them where they're at?
Well, I would find a safe person who you can talk to, someone who you consider to have wisdom, who can, either tell you that, yeah, you need help on that one. Or they could tell you, no, you're overreacting, because sometimes we overreact. But I would definitely, I mean, the Bible does say that there's wisdom in a multitude of counselors. Now, I'm not saying run around and talk to everybody until you hear what you want to hear. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, though, don't lean on your own understanding, because you might be, over interpreting things. I don't know. The best thing to do, though, is to open a dialogue with the person and say, these are the things that I'm having a challenge with. Are you willing to work with me on them? And if they say yes, that's great. If they're not willing to, then you need to reassess whether or not you want to continue to move forward.
That's a good point. Yeah. So again, right. Knowing where you're at, identifying safe people. I think that's important, right? Not everybody's a safe person, and having those counsel, right? And some people may not get it. It's important. Some people may not understand abuse. I think that's an important part, right, Edie? Because there's some people who may say, right, that you just want to have wisdom with that, right? So make sure you have safety, perhaps counseling, right? And like you said, sharing that not with everybody, but with people that are safe. And maybe you might not know who's safe, but as you share, you'll learn quickly, who might be safe or not safe in that situation. So I think that's good. And being encouraged, right? If you're out there, that there is hope, there is, safe people, and there are numbers to call, hotlines, if you're not sure, that they can talk with you and, walk you through that to see if you are in a safe place or not. So Edie, I appreciate that. I don't know if you have any other thoughts that you want to share with the audience.
I think the only other thought that I wanted to share is that, each person is worthy of being loved. And each one of us has great gifts inside of us that are meant to be shared with others, to encourage others and to speak life into others. And when we focus on the Lord and speaking life to the good attributes in others, I feel like at that point we're on the right path. The other thing is just to know that, God does turn all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purposes. And so I will tell you this, that the very summer that my marriage crashed and burned, it turns out years after the fact, I learned that exact same month in August of 2013, that's exactly when the Lord gave my current husband a dream and showed him a blonde woman with 2 daughters and asked him, if you want her, you could have her. And we weren't even friends at the time. And he didn't recognize me in the dream. But later on, we were talking about certain things. And I told him, yeah, my whole world came apart in August of 2013. And he's like, oh, that's so weird. And then he realized that that's when he had that dream. So right at the same time, when we tend to think that our world is at its worst, that's when God is working hardest behind the scenes to bring forth his plan in our lives. And I've always heard that, but now I have a concrete testimony to that effect. So I just want to encourage people.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing, right? That's on point, right? Sometimes when everything seems to be crumbling in the natural, it's actually everything's being built right in ways that we have no idea. And that's a word that I can even take today and say, yes, I'm receiving that. But I love that. I love stories, right? When we don't realize till later the puzzle pieces or things come together later and we're like, oh my gosh. So definitely amazing. Thank you, Edie. I appreciate your wisdom. And those of you who are watching, please know that, there is support, and that, yes, when it looks really bleak, that God is always for us, right? And that, if you're on your journey, that there are good things ahead, good plans ahead for you, and keep your hope. Even when it seems grim, there are good things ahead, and that can seem hard, but it is true. it may not feel true at the time, but you're amazing and incredible. So certainly tune in, and you can listen to Edie or listen to any of these Traumaplicity shows. We've talked about grief, sexual trauma, abuse, right? Overcoming mindsets. So there's so many things on here, and taking simple steps, right? Helping our brain just kind of take it step by bit to continue to heal, to become your best self, your best design of you, how you've always been meant to be, with people that care for you. So thank you, Edie. Thank you, everybody. And we hope you have a great night, and tune in next week for Traumaplicity.
Bye.
Bye.